Dave Tosch, Executive Director, Wenatchee Valley Senior Activity Center, and today I'm with Bob Clarke. Bob has been doing seminars, classes on mobile devices since 2017, actually. Of course, we haven't been doing them recently. I think when we closed last winter, he was just getting geared up to get started again, but we didn't get quite there. But the classes have been extremely popular among seniors who get mobile devices. We used to call them cell phones. I guess they still are, but they also have a lot of other things now attached with them that are hard to learn and discover. And so Bob was here helping folks do that. We thought that it'd be a good time to bring him in and talk to him. I know technology has already changed in the last year. I want to say also that Bob has his own business. It's Zeroz and Wuns is the name of the business, and we from time to time have some information about his business in our newsletter. And I know some of you have communicated with Bob and used his services, and that is another avenue. I'll let him talk a little bit about what he's doing right now with his business and all, but just want to welcome him and say thanks for coming by and chatting with us. We got a few things to talk about, and tell us a little more about your business, the Zeroz and Wuns.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Dave, for having me here. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here, and it's been fun to work with the Senior Center as well. One of the reasons that I started Zeroz and Wuns, which is kind of a play on computer words, is that I saw people that were overwhelmed with their devices. How do I do this? I've got this frustrating device in my hand. I don't know how to work with it. And so I wanted to give them a positive experience. And by doing that, it's a matter of learning how to use their device. And so with the Senior Center, we had a nice group setting where we could give out some general information. Well, then what do you do if someone has a very specific question? Well, people would call me, we'd set up an appointment, I'd go to their home, and for 1 or 2 hours, we'd sit down and answer their specific questions. And the end goal was, of course, is that when we're done, they can say, oh, wow, that's really cool. Thank you, and I'll keep learning some more about it. And so when they used their devices, they were very excited. Unfortunately, in March, that kind of all got disrupted and temporarily discontinued the home visits of helping people as well as coming to the Senior Center for the classes. But I'm anxious to get back into at the appropriate time, although that particular date hasn't been determined yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still see a few people running around with flip phones. Yeah, I think a lot of seniors are very hesitant about moving on to the newer technologies. But could you just talk a little bit about what you're seeing with regard to changing technology?
Yeah. Well, there's been some big changes. One of the things that I have my HP 41CV calculator I bought in 1981. 40 years later, I'm still using this device. It does some phenomenal math problems, okay? But you can't watch movies on it. You can't email, you can't text. There's just a whole bunch of things you can't do. So that's where this comes in, is this little device here allows me to do all those things that I can't do with my calculator. With that being said, I think it's important to recognize that the technology segment has always changed, and it's going to always keep changing. Yeah. And it just keeps changing every day, and sometimes by seconds. Now, the big thing I think that's happening is the rate at which it's changing. It's happening much faster than before. And everybody worldwide has had to adapt this year, and last year as well, had to adapt to this rapid change with it. I've seen families and individuals and churches and businesses all have to say, wow, how do I take this device here and be able to use it to still stay connected? And look at the Senior Center here, how much you've had to adapt in the last year with the technology.
It's interesting you bring up the calculator, because our thrift store has had 2 calculators back there that they use for transactions. And I don't know how old they are. They're probably 10 or 15 years old. And you cannot buy anything like that. And of course, we just need something simple, nothing fancy, with big keys that you can read, are really important. And so we've been looking around, and there's nothing in town, and we've gotten online, and we're not even sure that we can come close to replacing those old.
Right.
And then, of course, we have a few people back there that are working that don't have mobile devices where they have a calculator on the device.
Yes.
So, yeah, we're dealing with some of that and a lot of other things too with regard to technology. But so what, we keep hearing about the new iPhones every so often. Sometimes you wonder, is that just a marketing thing? They could sell more phones, or is it really because we need, instead of a 10, now we got to go to 11 or 12, What is the current state right now, today, of technology?
Well, that's a good question. And one of the things that's happening, I think fiber has really been the big story recently, is getting fiber. And of course, the big story that's happening recently is all the advertisements are about 5G. And I like to think of it as when we started out with these computers, we had a tiny little path that ran through the forest. But as we got better with the computers, we went to gravel roads, then we went to paved roads, and then we went to the 2-lane highway. Well, now we went to the interstate. Well, with 5G, we're on the superhighway that we can really travel. It's almost like being on the Autobahn, where you can travel at a very high speed and cover a lot of distance. That's all fine and dandy, and as our demand has increased for remote communications, the highway's starting to fill up even at 5G, with it. So what's interesting that even 6G is being developed, but already implemented in some countries as well. So it will always be changing and always getting bigger and better and faster and more reliable. With that being said, however, there's still an advantage to being in person. As an example, I could write a 500-page manual about how to use your device. It could take you years to read through it. Or if you just tell me, how do I do this? And I show you, push this button, then this button, and then this button, and you're done. And now you're happy you can have that positive experience.
We just got through the holidays, and I can only imagine that there were a lot of families that went out and got iPads or the newest mobile device for their parents and grandparents so they could stay connected by Zoom. Yeah. First it was Facebook, a lot of families tried to stay connected through Facebook, and the grandparents could find out what the grandkids were up to, this and that's changed. But now, because of the pandemic, the Zoom is very well known and heard about. But, I kind of wonder now that many of them have these devices, what next?
Yeah, well, my first response to that would be, don't panic, is that you have this new device and some people are even afraid to turn it on. So don't panic. Second of all, don't throw it in the trash and don't throw it at the wall. And I've heard more than one person that says, I'm just seconds away from throwing this device in the trash. I am so frustrated with it. Well, instead of doing that, let's just ask the question, well, what do you want to do with this device here? For instance, well, I'd like to take pictures of my flowers out in the backyard, okay? Then learn how to use the camera feature on your device, regardless whether you have a tablet or you have the mobile device. Learn how to do that. If you say, well, I'd like to be able to check the weather so that if I have to drive over to Seattle or something, I know what's the information that I need and how do I access it on my device. If you want to email, if you want to be able to check sports, if you want to be able to watch a podcast or a video cast, or how do I listen to a podcast, the news, getting directions, all those things, figure out what it is that you want to do with your device and then pursue that so that you get some positive experience out of it rather than trying to read through a 500-page manual that you'll probably get nothing out of.
I don't even think they print manuals anymore.
They don't. They're all online.
Yeah. So you got to get online to figure it out.
Right. Exactly.
But, I think there's just this real discomfort over what this thing is and what do I do first and where do I start kind of a thing. So what would you recommend that people do to become more comfortable initially so they can really get into it? Is there anything you can think of there?
Well, one thing that I've noticed is that what I've come to the conclusion, I grew up with pen, paper, and pencil. And if I wanted to do something, it was probably going to happen on a piece of paper with a pencil. If I wanted to set an alarm, I had to wind up the alarm clock, and I had to pull the knob out and twist it to get the correct time for the alarm. Sometimes I didn't do that very good, and woke up, I got a 3 a.m. wake-up call. Well, everything that we grew up with that was analog has now become digital. So my alarm clock, it's now digital. My calculator is now digital. The notes that I take, everything that I do is now digital. And that's a little bit where you have to kind of work through that, is saying, I grew up analog, but now everything is digital. I think one of the best recommendations would be to converse with your friends, is saying, what do you do with your device? How do you do that? And get that information from your friends, because they've gone through the hard times of trying to figure out how to do something. Mm-hmm. Let them help you out. The other thing you can do is like search your question. For those of you that might be comfortable with using the internet, for instance, when all this Zooming came out, and I saw people when I was on Zoom meetings, I saw a lot of ceilings because people were using their tablets and their laptops and their phones, and they were pointed up, and I was like looking up at this monster with the ceiling in the background. I said, there's got to be a better way to view that. So I searched how to make better presentations on Zoom. Well, I looked through a couple of those and I go, wow, that's really simple. So I have several board games that I stack up on top, and then I set my laptop up on top of that. That way I can adjust the screen so that I can have a nice background in the background. Like, for instance, having a plant or a wall that you can use as your background instead of the ceiling. That was just simply searching that on the internet. Of course, when we can resume classes back here at the Activity Center, we'll be able to start getting into those topics and covering those on a general basis for the group.
Yeah, we talk about Zoom a lot. Obviously, Zoom is just one of the media, or I should say platforms, that can be used to conduct meetings virtually. That's another big word right now, virtual meetings. But Zoom is the most familiar one, and that's the one we're using here at the Senior Center. It's the one that almost all the meetings that I attend virtually are on Zoom. So I'm one of those people that, if you know one, don't try to learn them all. Right. Try to stick with the one you know and make it as simple as you can. It gets real confusing when you go to jumping around to different platforms. But you want to talk a little more about Zoom. I know we've been trying to do some things on Zoom. I have a weekly meeting here at the Senior Center. Don't have a lot of participation. I think a lot of people are apprehensive. But, the mobile devices now you can use to do Zoom. You want to talk a little more about Zoom and the various alternatives and maybe how folks could get more familiar with it?
Yeah, and Zoom has been a great platform. And like you said, there's others been like FaceTime, and a lot of businesses use like the Microsoft Teams. There's the Google Duo, which I know several people that use that to be able to communicate with family, friends, and even conduct business. So there are multiple platforms that you can do it. You're right, learn one of them. And what's nice about it, if you learn one of them, learning the second one and the third one and the fourth one will just become easier. Because not everybody will have Zoom, and they might say, but I use Google Duo. So, okay, let's do that. And another, you might have a family that has all iPhones, and so you say, okay, well, let's all FaceTime together. Yeah. So you can learn, once you learn one platform, it gets easier to learn a different platform. Now with Zoom, what I would recommend is that at least get to know how to join a meeting, so that and usually if somebody sends you a request to join a Zoom meeting, you can click on the link. The rest of it's taken care of for you. So that's one of the easiest ways. But once you have attended a couple of Zoom meetings, then it's kind of fun to just go up on top where your menu is located and click through those different menu items and say, well, gosh, I wonder what that button does. I wonder what that button does. You can't hurt it, okay? And if everything goes south, you can always turn your computer off and turn it back on again. Same way with your phone. It is nice, and again, with the phones, in fact, I was on a Zoom last night with some folks, and the one person was saying, I can't see all of you. I can only see the person that's talking. So I said, okay, here's what you do. Yeah. And they did a simple, okay, now they got to see everybody else. Yeah. And that was really an interesting fact for them. So learn it a little bit at a time. And again, ask your friends, how are you using it? What have you found that's easy to help you use your Zoom? Yeah.
Well, you know, we've covered a lot of territory just in the last few minutes talking about all this. And I always try to dumb everything down, if you will, to keep it as simple as possible. But what would be a few of just the basic ideas that you would like to pass on to the folks today as we wind up here?
Well, my biggest experience that I've seen from in the last 3 or 4 years is each person's digital signature is just increasing all the time. We have an account with your social media. So if you have a Facebook, an Instagram, a Snapchat, a Twitter, each one of them's got a different username and password perhaps. Then when you go to your banking or your insurance, you've got all these different accounts. Yeah. So every one of us have a digital signature that just keeps growing and growing and growing every year. That you need to manage very carefully. The second part of it that I've noticed in helping people is when I say, okay, we need your username and password. And they go, my what? Then I know we're in trouble. So you have to keep track of your username and password for each of these accounts. And that's not easy to do. Now, even when you try to keep the same username and password, not every account will allow you to have the same username and password protocol type thing. So keep track of your username and password, especially when you ask someone in, let's say, 2 generations down in your family, say, can you help me set this up? And they go, da-da-da-da-da-da, and it's all set up. You have no idea what your username or password was because somebody else set it up. Yeah. So if somebody else sets up your account, make sure you know what your username and password. And the main thing, is just keep having fun with it. And again, once things open back up here at the Activity Center, we can resume some of those activities of learning how to use those devices.
Well, Bob, I want to thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
This has been really worthwhile, and I'd like to continue doing this kind of thing as long as we can't meet here and conduct our in-person classes. Right. I think this is, well, actually, it's the only way we have around it.
Right.
So we'll see if we can continue on, and hopefully once we get reopened up, we'll get your classes going as soon as we can.
Very good. Well, thanks for your time and the opportunity to be here today. Appreciate that.